Let's have a look at ammonification. Give me a second. Oh, okay. All right, ammonification. Now, this process really has a lot of controversy around it. Because some sources say that ammonification speaks to the release of inorganic nitrogen, right? Or it is just a production of ammonia, right? That will eventually dissolve to create ammonium ions, right? But let's stick to this narrative here, ammonification. Now, ammonification normally speaks to the conversion of the dead organisms, right? So ammonification is right there with decay, right? So it speaks to the decay as well. So what we're saying is that, right, plants can die, right, and animals, right, can die. And remember that the animals will be feeding on the plants, right? So they'll be feeding on the plants, and the plants would have been getting the nitrates from nitrification, right? Or direct rise symbiotic nitrogen fixation, right? From nitrogen fixation, right? So from assimilation or nitrogen fixation. And now the protein will be stored here. But when these organisms die, right, there is going to be ammonification, right, really happening, right? So usually when organisms die, we have stuff called decomposers, right? And yeah, so decomposers, right? But we do have different names for these things, right? Now, some of the decomposing, right, is done by mostly some bacteria, right? So bacteria like the Bacillus species, well, the Bacillus genus, right? So we're gonna have some Bacillus, we're gonna have some Clostridium, Clostridium, and Pseudomonas is also here as well. You know, we've seen Pseudomonas before, so we're gonna have Pseudomonas, Pseudomonas, right? And you do have Streptomyces, right? So you have a lot of ones, right? So we have decomposers. Now, what are decomposers? Decomposers, right? They can be microorganisms, or well, usually microorganisms, or such as bacteria, or they can be fungi or some types of invertebrates as well. So these tend to break down organic material, right, material into small inorganic material, right? So that's what decomposers technically do, right? So that should be fine so far. Now, we also have some other organisms that help out within decay, right? Which would be our saprophytes. So our saprophytes are a bit different. Saprophytic relationships, right, usually consist of plants with a plant or a fungus or other microorganisms that live on dead or decaying matter. Those are saprophytes, right? So saprophytes, right? And decomposers have that type of relationship, right? So, yeah, so saprophytes are types of decomposers as well. And we also have another one. I know that we know all of these, right? So saprophytes tends to be fungus, microbacteria, right? So let me write here. It's tend to be a fungus or a microbacteria, right? Or microorganism, sorry. Um, microorganism, right? Or it could be a plant too, right? So it could be a plant too. But we have other types, right? Or differences between these two groups, and we have another group called the tridivores, right? So the tridivores, right? So it's Deritovore, the tridivores, and these are usually animals, right? Like the vultures, right, and stuff like that. So detritivores. So some examples of detritivores could be like millipedes and wood lice and slugs and stuff like that, right? So we have all of these, right, just showing that decay. Now coming back to our our microorganisms like Bacillus, Clostridium, and Pseudomonas, we show that ammonification really speaks to the production of ammonium from proteins. So when proteins in these dead organisms break down, right, they usually break down through a process called deamination, right? So usually proteins are deaminated, allowing for amine groups to be removed, creating some amount of ammonium, right? So this is a part of ammonification, or where most of the ammonium would come from. So deamination, well, deamination is a part of it, right? So we usually look at the fact that the ammonium is being produced, right, from the death or the decay of the organism. So our decomposers like our Clostridium, our Bacillus, or Pseudomonas are breaking them down, right? So these are what we have here, right? So yeah, that's basically what it is. So decomposers would consume the organic matter, as we know, is consume the organic matter, right? And that will be well, and the nitrogen contained within the organic matter. So the nitrogen would be from the proteins in the organic matter, right? That would be broken down and converted to ammonia, right? Which will then exist in solution, right, as ammonium ions, hence ammonification, right? So the ammonium is then converted to nitrates by nitrifying bacteria, right? So ammonification really continues the cycle within the soil, right? So nitrification creates nitrates that the organisms can uptake. When the organisms die, the nitrogen returns to the soil through ammonification, and then nitrifying bacteria can take this ammonium and do the same process to it. So this is ammonification, right? So it usually is related with death and decay of organisms.